Hi, I'm Jeff Ray, your host for Economic Outlook. Welcome to our show. I'm back in the studio today after a break last week. A big thanks to my co-host George Lepignotis for filling in so admirably. We hope you make plans each week to join us as we discuss the region's most important economic developments and initiatives with a panel of experts. After 5 years, 4 phases, numerous fundraisers, and a supporting cast of, well, hundreds, the Reese Theater has reopened in downtown Plymouth to rave reviews. We'll tell you how this community got to this important day and why it's such a critical project for the area, and we'll give you an inside look at the renovated space coming up on Economic Outlook. We're back in the studio for a new season here at Economic Outlook, and today we believe we have a great show for you. Since 1940, the Reese Theater in Plymouth, Indiana has provided family entertainment that has provided generations with storied memories. Sadly, in 2009, the theater closed, leaving a big void in the heart of the community. But earlier this month, the theater celebrated the completion of renovations and its grand reopening. Joining me today to talk more about what's happening at the Reese Theater are Randy Danielson, the co-chair of the Reese Revitalization Project Committee, and Brent Martin, the project architect. Welcome, guys. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Guys, thanks. So we've highlighted Reese a couple years ago when we were down that way, just to sort of talk a little about the activities, but we've had an important celebration from then, so we're excited to show our viewers today a look inside. But we wanted to spend some time here in the studio talking about it. Randy, maybe as we start, though, come your way, talk a little bit about your involvement, how you got involved, how long you've been involved in the Reese effort there.
Well, actually, the initiative began in 2015 when the other Performing Arts Center at Plymouth, which is the Wild Rose Moon, they hosted a humanities class with 8th grade students. And one of the projects was for them to identify what would keep them in Plymouth or make them want to come back to Plymouth and reside. And so there were 6 groups that presented, and 3 of the groups came up with the idea that the Reese Theater needed to come back to life. My wife and I were at that particular event, and that kind of instilled in us, that there was a need. And then later that next year, the owner of the Wild Rose Moon, which is George Schricker, he came to me at the funeral home. I spent a career at the funeral homes, and he indicated that as well, the theater needed to come back to life. And so my wife and I were positioning ourselves for retirement. Didn't know that that retirement, first 5 years, would be restoring a theater. But actually, after the gift was made to purchase the theater and move it into a 501c3 situation, we went with Brent and my wife and I, we went to the Embassy Theater, and it was in Fort Wayne, because we enrolled the Reese Theater in what is called the League of Historic American Theaters. And they did tell us at that point in time that if you're just starting this process, you've embarked on a 5 to 10 year process. And my wife looked at me with a little bit of concern, because we weren't totally prepared for that kind of a time frame. But we did it in 6 years. The community did it in 6 years. And as they say, that takes a village. It took a village and more. So
great.
Yeah.
Brent, let's come your way a little bit. And
Sure.
Let's talk about, so you're an architect with SRKM Architecture in Warsaw.
Warsaw, Indiana.
So talk a little bit about how you get involved in a project like the Reese.
I like to tell people that my love affair with the Reese Theater started in the mid-1990s because we did some restoration work on the exterior facade when it was still in operation. John and Gwen Hosel were the owners at that point in time. Although, like a lot of historic single-screen theaters, it was getting just very difficult for them to maintain operations. Subsequent to that, the theater, of course, did close, and Randy and Eleanor and I talked a lot about what our vision might be for getting it reopened. We decided very early on that 2 things. It needed to be very, very multi-purpose. We couldn't make it sustainable just showing movies. It was not going to work. So it's set up so that you can have banquets or business meetings or theatrical performance, music, and movies. And the other thing is that it was very important that we create a space that was in the spirit of the Reese Theater as a late Art Deco piece of architecture. And I think we kind of accomplished that. It's got a nice feel when you come inside.
I think the finished product's getting some rave reviews, and I think hopefully several people watching today will want to come down and experience what's happening there.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do, yeah.
Randy, I want to come back your way. So can you give us some historical context, just sort of the Reese Theater's prominence in the community, importance in the community, how long it's been around, kind of what happened there through the years?
Well, I think the important thing is the structure itself was built in 1865 during the Civil War. And it was a 3-story brick edifice. It was the largest building in Plymouth. And so in 1925, the Reese family came from Pulaski County to Plymouth, and they were in the theater business, and they bought an aging theater. It was called the Gem. And so they renovated it and restored it. But at that time, there was a lot of competition between theaters. I mean, that's where people wanted to go. That's where air conditioning was and comfort. And so there was another theater in Plymouth called the Rialto, and they wanted to be the best. So they did a renovation. And Stuart and Opal Reese, they thought, well, we're going to make the best theater we can possibly make. And so they started traveling the United States and getting best practices. And one of the things they came back with was their theater was going to have a cry room. And they found that in New Jersey. And so they decided to buy that corner and transform that aging building into a theater. And so 1939, Alves O'Keefe, he was the architect at the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what was really nice was we have the drawings from Alves O'Keefe. So recreating all those Art Deco details was something that wasn't, I won't say it was easy, but we had a footprint. And
Right. It was feasible because we had some of that original material that long gone as far as being in the theater, but yet, hey, there's the drawings. And we had photographs from opening night in 1940. And so we used those as inspiration for what we created.
What happened on opening night 1940? Any idea what they showed or any of that?
Remember the Night.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the film.
Remember the night? Okay.
Correct.
Very good.
It's kind of a Christmas film, but it opened in February 1st of 1940.
Okay. And the Reese family, so they're prominent Plymouth business people at the time. They're theater fans, a little bit of both. What was it that inspired them to sort of make this investment in Plymouth?
Well, they wanted to take the lead again on that competition, so to speak. But
They wanted to host the A-list movies.
Okay.
So they made their theater as nice and as modern as it could be for 1940.
yeah, when it opened, all newspaper accounts that I have read that are in the Historical Museum is that it was the most advanced technologically and sound of any theater, rural theater, in all of Indiana and possibly the Midwest. So they brought all those aspects together, and air conditioning was a big deal at the time. So they had it all. They had hand dryers, the automatic hand dryers that you would see modern day that we don't use much now because of COVID. But those were installed even in 1939. So it was pretty classic.
So fast forward a little bit. Let's go in the mid to late 2009, I think is the date that I remember it closed. So it closes and it sits largely unoccupied for the next several years?
Yeah, fortunately, about 3 years after it closed, 2 local business owners, also downtown business owners, purchased the Reese really to protect it. They were afraid it's going to get so bad, somebody's just going to knock it down, it's going to become a parking lot or whatever, and they just didn't want that to happen. So they sort of held it in escrow, if you will, until something could come along and make it happen.
Right.
And that took a few years, but they did.
Yep. So Brent, you then have this responsibility. You get to be the person that helps put these pieces of this back together as the project architect. So talk a little bit about just sort of this reimagining piece, this respecting the historical piece, but
Sure.
also thinking what
Well,
a new theater needs?
Yeah, there is just a tremendous amount of technology in the Reese, and we wanted it to be on the cutting edge of technology. That's why it's got a giant LED screen that moves and all the audio visual accoutrements that you'd expect, in a first-rate movie house and performing arts center. So I think of our role as kind of the hub, because we've got an interior design consultant and a theater consultant and a structural engineer and an electrical engineer, all these people that are consulting, and then we're the spot where that all comes together, and sometimes we argue about things. I remember several,
Yep.
but that's okay. That's part of that process. One of the big things that we did do with the level tiers that are connected with ramps, that reduces our seating capacity. So our seating capacity is 236 now. The reason it's that much is that we had enough ceiling height to put a balcony in the back. The Reese in 1940 did not have a balcony, and sat 600, if you can believe it, just packed in like this. But 236, very intimate setting, and from the front of the stage to the back wall is only about 75, 76 feet. Really, really feel like you're right in the performance, which is nice.
Great. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going out into the field. George Lepiniotis, we've sent him down to Plymouth for an inside look at the theater. George, let me toss it to you.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm downtown Plymouth at the new but also old Reese Theater, and I'm joined today by Don Wendell. Don, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Don, tell me a little bit about your history and how it came to be that you're involved here at the Reese Theater.
I retired from my regular job, and 2018, Plymouth had a historic 100-year flood in 2018. So for 2018, I was part of a group that rebuilt homes for low-income people. So I coordinated construction there. I ran into Randy Danielson one night eating dinner, and he roped me into what's now 4 years down the road. I think his promise was a year stint.
So roping you into it is great, but I have a sense as we've been here today, and I met Randy the last time I was here at the Reese, and for our viewers who are familiar with the project, the Reese is one of the oldest structures in Plymouth. I believe we said before we went on air that the Reese was built the same year Lincoln was assassinated.
Correct. Yep.
But if you walk around here today, and as our viewers are going to see in the images that we're showing them now, you couldn't tell that it's not a brand new facility.
Yes.
So you've spent 4 years as a labor of love, along with many people, hundreds of people that came together from Plymouth and beyond to support the reconstruction of the Reese. Let's start with that. Taking a building that was built in 1865, and I know you have a pretty long history in construction, that was your profession by trade.
Yes.
That's a hard challenge.
It was, and especially here it was. We had some structural issues. So to start with, this building was stripped down to the bones. And I mean, 4 walls and a roof. Everything else was exposed. It had some structural issues, so those had to be solved early on. And that was all solved before we started putting anything back. But your viewers will see only a few things that we were actually able to save that anyone that came here before will recognize. We're standing in front of one of them. This circle window was always here, and everyone remembers that walking in the door.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and largely the theme is somewhat similar. I think you tried to stay historically accurate. You had some blueprints.
Correct. Yeah.
And when we say the Reese was a historic part of this community. It was built in, or converted. This building was built long before it was the Reese Theater, but the Reese was 1940.
1940, it was turned into a theater.
Okay.
Yes.
And that stayed open and operational as a prime movie theater in town until 2008?
2009. Yes.
So
Yep.
for a long time, this was the Reese Theater.
It was.
Yeah.
Yes.
And now, as you've reimagined it, and I think we talked about a great story where the idea, the spark, the seed, if you will, came from a group of Plymouth Junior High School students.
Correct. There was a competition. I believe there was 5 groups involved, and the majority of them said for me to come back after I get out of college, it would be nice if the Reese was revitalized.
Yeah, yeah. We think about Main Street USA, and a movie theater is always part of that image that
Yes.
we have. So as we walked around here today, I was wowed. Our viewers are going to be wowed. You guys have remained historically true. And I know this was a labor of love, a lot of volunteer. It's a non-for-profit organization that owns the facility.
Correct.
You raised almost $4 million. You've put every penny back into this building, and it shows. But the goal moving forward is to make sure that it's sustainable on its own. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
How do you plan on doing that? How do you plan on revenuing a facility like this?
We figured out very early on we couldn't make it just as a movie theater. You just could not make enough money to sustain what we wanted to do. So it is multi-use, from wedding receptions to educational programs to movies, of course, live bands. We have an orchestra pit if we want to have an orchestra. And our seating is able to be structured for any of those. And so if you go out, or anyone driving by on the south side of the facility, there are banners up on the side, and every one of them represents what we want to do.
Okay, all right. So let's talk a little bit about that. There's the giant screen, which I think our viewers can see behind us, but they'll also see some overlay videos that we'll take of that thing. It's amazing. I couldn't figure out when I first walked in what it was and how a projection was so clean. It's not a projector.
Nope, it's an LED screen, so
Okay.
there's no projector anywhere in the facility.
All right, and you can see the screen. The screen actually moves back and forth, so you can gain stage, and the stage is almost like a transformer. You can create an opera pit. You can do all sorts of things with it, and that really is what it feels like to me. It feels like a movie theater at heart that has sprouted new wings and could do new things.
Yes.
As our viewers want more information, where can they go to find out more about that week's activities and the rest of your future plans?
ReeseTheater.com.
TheReeseTheater.com here in Plymouth.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much, Don. Appreciate it. Great job.
Thank you.
I know now that the theater's done, we're going to have to find something else exciting for you to do.
Okay, thanks.
Jeff, back to you in the studio. As I've told you before in our opening shows and when we get together, this has been one of my favorite stories during my time here at WNIT. This is such a creative and passionate project that combines the passion of a community with smart business sense and takes a landmark in small towns across the country and shows what can be done.
George, thanks for the inside look. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for hosting us down there. A great chance to see the theater and all the great work that's happened there. Randy, as we finish, kind of our discussion about that, I think obviously the renovation's important. It's an important fixture. But looking forward, I think, is one of the things we want to focus on as you're thinking about programming and operation and how you get people down there. Talk a little bit about what's next down at the Reese.
Well, we really feel like we have built the region's newest performing arts center. It has like 6 pillars of operation where we can do music, dance, private events, theater. All those come together at one place. And so we're rolling out 9 different performances that are already in progress and under contract. We'll have those out under our website, which is reesetheater.com. And we hope that it is a catalyst for not only Plymouth, but all of Marshall County to build momentum in arts and culture and creating somewhat of a little bit of a campus in downtown Plymouth for people to come. We have new restaurants that are on the horizon, and I think they're going to see a transition in Plymouth over the next few years, and we're really pleased to be a part of it.
Yeah. It's very nice downtown to get that sort of critical mass. You have the Reese Performing Arts Center, you've got Wild Rose Moon Performing Arts Center, Heartland Artists is downtown, the Marshall County Museum, award-winning Marshall County Museum.
Exactly.
Just a nice base there to build from. And yeah, Randy's right, we're talking with some restaurants, and all of a sudden it's an arts and culture district, and that's great, just great.
So quality of place is the big buzzword. We talk so much, and places like theaters form such an anchor for that. So we're thrilled to hear a little bit about that. Talk briefly just about the effort to get here. Obviously, these things aren't cheap. Somebody's got to operate this. You got to raise the money to do this, to staff it. Can you speak to just a few of those key partners maybe that helped get you to where you are today?
Well, we were very fortunate to be a part of Regional Cities, a grant from them. Of course, when Marshall County won the Stellar Award, Crossroads made it their hallmark project.
Great.
So, we have stellar funds that came into play. But to kick it all off was the City of Plymouth and redevelopment, and an entire community. I mean, we raised over $1 million of private funds to complete this. In addition to that, we have nearly $600,000 of gifted materials and services from area vendors, that have been such a support, or we wouldn't be here today and announcing that, we're open and ready for business. So
And so the theater today is owned and operated by who?
it's a 501c3,
Great.
the Reese Theater Incorporated.
Yep.
So, you own as much of it as anyone.
Right, right.
We all do.
Yep.
And I think that for sustainability, all the things that we mentioned have to be in play. One of the things I'd like to mention, though, a gift that came, it was a bequeathal. I got a phone call just 2 weeks before the theater opened, and she expressed to me that she had a bequeathal that a gentleman who was an orphan to the age of 12. He was adopted by a Lakeville family. His name is Tom Grisiak. He left, didn't get to see the result, but he was so excited to hear that his beloved theater was going to reopen. When he was an orphan himself, that's the greatest joy he got, was going to movies at the Reese. So he left a bequeathal that no child 12 or under will ever pay for a movie
Wonderful.
at the Reese Theater.
That's great.
Yep.
Brent, as we're heading into our last few minutes, so Plymouth's not the only town that's had to deal with projects like this. Many old towns have that old theater there.
They sure do.
It seems like we can learn a lot of lessons from Plymouth in terms of how they attack this and stuff. So share some maybe best practice or lessons that we might share with others.
I would say the big thing is to make that core group of people who are going to be involved in the project from day one to completion and beyond as broad-based as you could possibly make it. That's really, really essential, because it is a community project. Whether it's the Reese Theater or a theater in Culver or Rochester or Logansport or any of the northern central Indiana communities, that is what it takes. It can never be Brent's Theater.
Right.
It has to be that community-based thing. So I would encourage any folks, be prepared for 5 to 10 years. That's important. And be as broad as you can be and as interactive as you can be with the community. That's the key to success.
Great. And Randy, I'll come back your way, because you and your wife played such a critical role, but in other communities, other people are sitting on the fence thinking about that same thing. Any advice to other business or community leaders about getting involved in a project like this?
Well, I think reinvesting in your community, if you have a passion for your community, reinvestment is what it takes to move it forward. And so I think we took that approach when we were positioned for retirement, not to just walk away, but to become more of a part of it.
Yeah.
And I think Brent is exactly right. We surrounded ourselves with the talent that was necessary, with the committee that we put together, and we didn't lose any of those members.
Great.
Feel very
So in our last couple minutes, because we want to make sure people come experience it. So again, touch a little bit on the some of the things on the horizon through the rest of the year that maybe people should have on their radar in terms of why and when they should come down there, maybe.
Go ahead.
Well, I only have a general knowledge
Yeah.
because I'm not in the booking department.
Yeah, right, sure. Yeah.
But I do know that we've got 9 events coming up, and as Randy had mentioned, definitely go to the Reese Theater website,
Yep.
which is just enter it on Google, it's going to pop right up, and you can start to see all those events. Some are movies, still working a lot on booking entertainment. And quite frankly, it is available for private parties as well, and we've got some of that booked. So that's the key to making it sustainable, is to have all those different fingers in the pot so that you're not dependent on just one aspect. I was very excited to see Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as the first movie. That happened to be our benefactor's favorite movie.
Exactly.
So it was perfect. And we even had Willy Wonka in costume out there on the sidewalk. So, it's got to be fun.
Right.
It's got to be fun.
You know, the stage itself was named after a music teacher, 38 years in Plymouth, Marshall County, which was Bob Pickell. And so 2 of his students are the first to play on that stage, was Denver Bierman and the Mile High Orchestra. And our next performance will be Brett Wiscons. He's in Indianapolis, another great performer.
Great.
So
Well,
that's
ReeseTheater.com, right? So,
yes.
good. Guys, thank you so much. Appreciate
Very
you
good.
being here today. Great.
Thank
and
you.
congratulations on your good work. Appreciate you sharing
Thank
your
you.
story
Thank
with
you.
us.
Appreciate that.
That's it for our show today. Thank you for watching on WNIT or listening to our podcast. To watch this episode again or any of our past episodes, you can find Economic Outlook at WNIT.org or find our podcast on most major podcast platforms. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Please join us next week as we continue to cover the region's most exciting and important topics that affect you. I'm Jeff Ray. I'll see you next time.
This WNIT local production has been made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.